I'm Madison, 34. And I'll never forget the moment I stepped onto that gleaming white yacht while my sister-in-law Heather's jaw dropped in horror. After years of her subtle put-downs and manipulation, she'd finally succeeded in banning me from the annual family trip. What she didn't know, I owned the very yacht they'd been vacationing on for years. The look on her face when the captain greeted me with, "Welcome aboard, Mrs. Ellis, so good to have the owner with us today," was worth every penny of my investment. Before I share how this showdown unfolded, where are you watching from? Hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever fantasized about the perfect revenge against someone who underestimated you. Benjamin and I met at a charity gala 5 years ago. I was there representing my investment firm, while he attended as part of his family's obligation to maintain social appearances. Our eyes met across the auction floor, and by the end of the night, we'd spent hours talking in a quiet corner, while the elite of the city bid on overpriced vacation packages. He was charming, intelligent, and refreshingly genuine compared to the other trust fund heirs I'd encountered. What Benjamin didn't know that night was that I was already quite successful in my own right. After working my way up through the cutthroat world of finance, I'd made several shrewd investments that had paid off handsomely. I lived comfortably but modestly, preferring to reinvest most of my earnings. My parents had taught me the value of financial independence and the importance of never flaunting wealth, lessons that would prove invaluable later. Benjamin came from old money, but his particular branch of the family tree had been struggling for years. His father Richard had made several poor business decisions, and they were maintaining appearances on increasingly thin resources. Benjamin worked at his father's company but had been trying to modernize their approach without much support. His sister Heather, 2 years his senior, had married strategically into another wealthy family, and never let anyone forget it. After a whirlwind romance, Benjamin and I married in a ceremony that was smaller than his family expected but perfect for us. We settled into a beautiful modern apartment in the city, close to both our workplaces. Our life together seemed perfect. We traveled, enjoyed the cultural offerings of the city, and were talking about starting a family soon. My first meeting with Benjamin's family had been at their sprawling country estate about a month after we started dating. Heather had organized a weekend gathering, ostensibly to welcome me. On the surface, everyone was polite. Eleanor, Benjamin's mother, asked appropriate questions about my background and career. Richard talked about his business ventures. Heather gave me a tour of the family home, pointing out heirlooms and portraits while subtly emphasizing their lineage. "This vase is Ming Dynasty," she'd said, watching my reaction carefully. "Our grandmother brought it back from her travels in the 1950s. Family history is so important to us." The undercurrent was clear. They were assessing whether I belonged in their world. That first weekend, I noticed how Benjamin slightly changed around his family, becoming more formal, less spontaneous. He deferred to Heather often, a pattern that would become increasingly problematic. "Heather always handles the family events," he explained when I asked why his sister seemed to make decisions for everyone. "She's got a knack for it, and it makes Mom happy." Over the next few months, the subtle judgment became more apparent. At a dinner celebrating Benjamin's birthday, Heather seated me far from Benjamin, between 2 elderly cousins who spent the evening talking across me. When I mentioned a work achievement, Eleanor changed the subject to her charity committee. Richard asked about my parents' occupation with a hint of condescension when I mentioned my father had been a teacher and my mother a nurse. "How nurturing," Heather had commented with a tight smile. Benjamin noticed some of these slights but minimized them. "That's just how they are with everyone at first," he'd assure me. "They'll warm up." But they didn't. Instead, the exclusion became more pronounced. Family conversations would switch to reminiscing about people I didn't know whenever I joined. Heather would forget to copy me on emails about family events. Benjamin's cousin Grace would make references to private jokes, then say, "Oh, sorry, Madison wouldn't understand." Meanwhile, my career continued to flourish. I was promoted to senior investment advisor, managing portfolios for several high-net-worth clients. Benjamin was proud of me, but when he mentioned my success at a family dinner, Heather quickly redirected the conversation to her husband's recent yacht purchase. That was when I made a decision that would change everything, though I didn't know it at the time. One of my clients was selling his luxury yacht, a stunning 120-foot vessel with all the amenities. On impulse, after discovering the vessel was actually the same one Heather's husband had been considering but couldn't quite afford, I made an offer through a holding company. It was an indulgence, certainly, but also a solid investment in the charter market. I didn't tell Benjamin immediately. Something held me back, perhaps an instinct that this information might be better kept private from his family for now. Instead, I arranged for the yacht to be managed by a respected charter company when we weren't using it. The company already handled the vessel that Benjamin's family rented each year for their Mediterranean vacation, a fact I filed away without much thought at the time. The family dynamic continued to revolve around Heather. Benjamin's parents deferred to her opinions on everything from wine selection to investment advice, despite her lack of financial background. Cousins Grace and Kyle followed her lead in all social situations. The family hierarchy was clear, Heather at the top, with everyone else arranged according to their perceived adherence to family traditions and status. And I, despite my marriage to Benjamin, remained firmly at the bottom of this hierarchy, the outsider who didn't quite understand their ways, who didn't have the right background, who needed to be tolerated rather than embraced. I tried to focus on my relationship with Benjamin, who was loving and attentive when we were alone. But I couldn't help wondering how long we could maintain our happiness with this undercurrent of family tension. The annual family vacation announcement came during Sunday brunch at Eleanor and Richard's home. As usual, Heather took charge, standing at the head of the table with a portfolio of glossy brochures. "I've finalized the details for our Mediterranean trip," she announced, smiling at the assembled family members. 2 weeks along the French and Italian coast, with stops at all our favorite ports. The yacht is booked, the same one as last year since everyone enjoyed it so much. Benjamin squeezed my hand under the table. "You're going to love it," he whispered. "The coastline is breathtaking, and the little harbors we visit are so charming." I smiled, genuinely excited. Despite the tensions with Benjamin's family, I love traveling, and I'd been looking forward to experiencing this tradition that Benjamin spoke about so fondly. Perhaps, I thought, sharing this special trip would help bridge the gap between myself and the family. "We'll depart on the 15th, Heather continued, handing out printed itineraries. "I've arranged for car service to the marina for everyone." She placed an itinerary in front of me with a tight smile, and I felt a momentary hope that this trip might be a new beginning. Benjamin and I discussed the vacation on the drive home, making plans for side excursions and talking about the coastal towns we'd visit. 3 days later, I returned home early from work, planning to surprise Benjamin with dinner reservations at a new restaurant. As I entered our apartment, I heard his voice from his home office. He was on the phone, his tone defensive. "I know she's been looking forward to it, Heather, but if you really think it's for the best." I froze in the hallway, my hand still on my bag. "Of course I understand family traditions," Benjamin continued. "But Madison is my wife now, she is family." A pause. "No, I don't think she'd be uncomfortable. She's traveled extensively." Another longer pause. "That's not fair, Heather. She's made every effort to fit in." I should have made my presence known, but something kept me rooted to the spot as Heather apparently continued speaking. "Fine," Benjamin finally said. His voice deflated. "I'll talk to her. But I'm not happy about this, and I want that on record." When he ended the call, I waited a moment before entering the apartment noisily, calling out a greeting as if I'd just arrived. Benjamin emerged from his office looking troubled, but he forced a smile. That night he didn't mention the call and I didn't bring it up. I wanted to give him the chance to be honest with me, but as days passed and he remained silent about the vacation, the knot in my stomach grew tighter. A week later I confronted him. "Is there something going on with the family vacation? You haven't mentioned it lately." Benjamin's face fell and he looked away. "I was going to talk to you about that. Heather thinks, the family thinks, it might be better if you skip this year's trip." The words hit me like a physical blow. "Better? Better for whom?" "It's complicated," he said, running a hand through his hair. "There are family traditions, ways of doing things. Heather thinks it might be uncomfortable for you being your first time." "Uncomfortable for me? Or for Heather?" asked. my voice steady despite the hurt blooming in my chest. That's not fair, Benjamin protested weakly. Isn't it? I heard your phone call with her last week, Benjamin. I heard you agreed to exclude me from a family vacation. A vacation that, as your wife, I should be included in. His face paled. You were eavesdropping? I came home early to surprise you. Hearing my husband agree to leave me behind while he vacations with his family wasn't exactly the surprise I had planned. The argument that followed was painful. Benjamin oscillated between defensive justifications and apologetic promises to fix the situation. He claimed he'd only tentatively agreed to appease Heather, that he planned to change her mind. But underneath his explanations, I sensed his reluctance to confront his sister directly. I'll talk to her again, he promised. I'll make her understand that either you come too or I don't go. I wanted to believe him, but doubt had taken root. Do you actually want me there, Benjamin? Or is it easier if I stay behind? Of course I want you there, he insisted, taking my hands. You're my wife. We're a team. I nodded, willing myself to trust him. Then stand up for us. For me. He promised he would, but as the days passed, no update came. Then came the family dinner where everything was brought into the open. Heather had invited the extended family to finalize vacation details. I attended with Benjamin, still hoping he had managed to change the situation. As dessert was served, Heather stood to address the group. So, final details for our yacht adventure, she said cheerfully. We've got 12 confirmed, which is perfect for the sleeping arrangements. I did a quick mental count. 12 included Benjamin but not me. I felt his hand tense in mine under the table. Madison won't be joining us this year, Heather continued smoothly, not looking in my direction. Logistical constraints with the yacht capacity, unfortunately. But we'll include her next time. Of course. The table fell awkwardly silent. Benjamin's cousin Grace studied her dessert intently. Uncle Philip took a large gulp of wine. No one made eye contact with me. I waited for Benjamin to speak up, to challenge the lie about capacity issues. The yacht easily accommodated 16 passengers. I knew this for a fact. But Benjamin remained silent. His face flushed with shame. Such a shame, I said into the silence, my voice surprisingly steady. I was looking forward to experiencing this family tradition. Eleanor made a non-committal noise. There's always next year, dear. The conversation moved on to other details, departure times, packing suggestions, shore excursions. I sat through it all with a fixed smile, feeling increasingly invisible. When Benjamin and I left that night, the car ride home was silent until we reached our apartment. You didn't say anything, I said as we entered. You sat there while your sister lied about why I couldn't come, and you said nothing. I'm sorry, he said, his voice small. I froze. I should have spoken up. Yes, you should have. She made me look like an outsider in front of your entire family, and you let her. I'll call her tomorrow, he promised. I'll tell her we're both coming or neither of us is. But I had heard similar promises before. Will you, Benjamin? Because from where I'm standing, you've chosen your sister over your wife. Again. The hurt in my chest had crystallized into something harder, colder. This wasn't just about a vacation anymore, it was about respect, loyalty, and whether our marriage could survive with Benjamin caught between his wife and his family. That's not true, he protested. I love you. This is just a complicated situation. It's actually very simple, I replied, gathering my dignity around me like armor. Either we're partners who stand together or we're not. And right now it feels like we're not. I slept in the guest room that night, my mind racing with hurt and anger. The next morning I left for work early, avoiding further conversation. Something fundamental had shifted in our relationship, and I wasn't sure if we could find our way back. The days following Heather's public exclusion were some of the most difficult of my marriage. Benjamin and I circled each other cautiously, our conversations superficial and tense. He made several attempts to discuss the situation, but his words rang hollow without concrete action to back them up. I'm caught in the middle, he explained one evening. I love you, but they're my family. I can't just cut them off. I've never asked you to choose between me and your family, I responded, frustration building. I've only asked to be treated with respect as your wife, and for you to stand up for that respect. At work, I threw myself into projects, grateful for the distraction. But even there, thoughts of my crumbling marriage intruded. During lunch with my best friend Tara, I finally confided everything. That's beyond passive-aggressive, Tara said, outraged on my behalf. That's just straight-up aggressive. And Benjamin needs to grow a spine. I know, I sighed. But it's complicated. His family dynamic was established long before I came along. Complicated or not, he married you, not his sister, Tara pointed out. Have you considered just showing up at the marina? What could they do then? I smiled at Tara's directness. Create a scene I'd rather avoid, probably. Besides, this isn't just about the vacation anymore. Later that week, I sought wisdom from my mentor Harold, a senior partner at my firm who had guided my career for years. Family conflict is among the most difficult to navigate, Harold acknowledged after listening to my situation. But in my experience, these dynamics don't change unless someone forces the issue. The question is, are you prepared for the potential fallout of standing your ground? His question gave me pause. Was I ready for what might happen if I confronted this situation head-on? What if it led to the end of my marriage? I think I have to be, I finally answered. Because the alternative is accepting a marriage where I'll always come second to his family's wishes. Meanwhile, Benjamin made increasingly desperate attempts to appease me without actually addressing the real problem. He brought home flowers, suggested weekend getaways, just the two of us, and even proposed an alternative vacation to destinations of my choosing. We could go to Bali, he suggested one evening. Or Japan. You've always wanted to see the cherry blossoms, Benjamin. I said gently, this isn't about where I vacation. It's about being deliberately excluded from a family event by your sister, and you allowing it to happen. He looked defeated. I don't know how to fix this. Yes, you do, I countered. You just don't want to have the difficult conversation with Heather that fixing it requires. As the departure date for the yacht trip approached, I found myself researching Benjamin's family more thoroughly. I discovered through business news archives that Richard's company had been quietly selling off assets to maintain liquidity. Heather's husband's family, while still wealthy, had also faced recent setbacks that weren't public knowledge. The picture emerged of a family desperately clinging to status while their financial foundation eroded. Heather's need for control suddenly made more sense. She was protecting the image of prosperity and exclusivity that gave her identity. I was a threat not because of who I was, but because I represented change in a world she struggled to keep static. I also learned more about past family conflicts. Benjamin's cousin Kyle had once brought a girlfriend from a working-class background to family events. The relationship mysteriously ended after a family vacation where, according to social media posts I found, she had been subtly ostracized throughout the trip. The pattern was clear. Heather acted as gatekeeper to the family, and those who didn't meet her standards were pushed out, with the silent compliance of everyone else. Benjamin wasn't unique in his failure to stand up to her. It was the established family response. With this knowledge, I began to formulate a plan. My ownership of the yacht they would be using, unknown to any of them, provided a unique opportunity. I could use this information in various ways. I could cancel their reservation last minute. I could show up and reveal my ownership dramatically. Or I could remain silent and know the truth while they vacationed on my property. Each option had merits and drawbacks. Cancellation would be immediately satisfying but would hurt innocent family members and probably destroy my marriage. Saying nothing maintained my dignity but resolved nothing. The middle path, confronting the situation directly but not vindicatively, seemed the most likely to effect real change. I considered the ethical implications carefully. My goal wasn't to humiliate Heather, satisfying as that might be in the moment. My goal was to reset the power dynamic in my marriage and with my in-laws, to establish respect that had been missing. The revelation needed to be strategic and measured. I also needed to give Benjamin one last chance to stand with me on his own, without forcing his hand. If our marriage was to survive, he needed to make that choice himself. I decided to have one final conversation with him before putting my plan into action. Benjamin, I said that evening, the yacht trip is in 3 days. This is your last opportunity to stand up for us as a couple. Either you tell your family that we come together, or I'll take matters into my own hands." He looked alarmed. "What does that mean? What are you planning to do?" "I'm planning to protect my self-respect," I answered simply. "I'd prefer to do that with you by my side, but I'm prepared to do it alone if necessary." Benjamin promised to call Heather that night. I gave him the privacy to do so, taking a long walk around our neighborhood to clear my head. When I returned, his defeated expression told me everything I needed to know. "She says it's too late to change arrangements," he reported, "and that she'll make sure you're included next year." I nodded, a strange calm settling over me. "I see. And will you still be going?" His hesitation was answer enough. I thought maybe I could use the opportunity to talk to everyone, make them understand how important you are to me. While enjoying a vacation from which I've been explicitly excluded, I clarified. He had no response to that. We went to bed in silence, further apart than ever. But while Benjamin slept restlessly beside me, I lay awake finalizing the details of my plan. Tomorrow I would make the necessary arrangements. This situation had gone on long enough. The next morning I called into work and took a personal day, something I rarely did. After Benjamin left for his office, I sat down at my computer with a cup of coffee and began a more thorough investigation into the family dynamics I'd married into. Benjamin had always been careless with his passwords, and we shared a cloud storage account where he often backed up emails and documents. I had never had reason to look through his files before, respecting his privacy. But now, with my marriage potentially at stake, I needed to understand exactly what I was dealing with. What I found left me cold. There were numerous email chains between Heather and other family members discussing me, and none of it was flattering. In one exchange from just after our engagement, Heather wrote to Grace, "We need to be patient. These kinds of relationships burn out quickly once the novelty wears off. Benjamin will realize she doesn't fit into our world. Remember Allison? She lasted almost a year before he came to his senses." I had never heard of Allison. Benjamin had told me about his serious girlfriends, but this name was new. In another email more recent, Heather had written to Benjamin directly, "I know you think you're happy with Madison, but ask yourself if she really understands our family values and traditions. She's from a completely different background. There's nothing wrong with that, of course, but long-term compatibility requires shared foundations." The most shocking discovery was an email thread from just 2 weeks ago, discussing the upcoming yacht trip. Heather had written to several family members. "Madison won't be joining us this year. I've explained to Benjamin that this is a family tradition that needs to be experienced properly the first time, but the truth is I'm concerned about her motivations. She's very interested in the family finances, always asking questions about the business. Classic gold digger behavior. Benjamin is too enamored to see it, but this break will give him perspective." The irony of being called a gold digger when I had more personal wealth than Benjamin was not lost on me. But more disturbing was the realization that Heather had been actively working to undermine our relationship from the beginning, and that others were involved. Grace had replied to that email with, "Totally agree. I've been telling Mark she gives off those vibes. Did you see how she was asking about the vacation properties last Christmas? Fishing for info." I remembered that conversation. I had been making polite small talk with Grace's husband about architecture, as he worked in real estate development. Even Benjamin's mother Eleanor had chimed in. "Benjamin has always been impressionable. Remember how Patricia's daughter seemed perfect for him? Perhaps we should invite her to the Labor Day gathering." Patricia was a family friend whose daughter Charlotte had apparently been deemed a more suitable match for Benjamin. Another email confirmed they had been seated together at a recent charity event Benjamin had attended without me due to a work commitment. It hadn't been coincidental. My hands were shaking by the time I finished reading. This wasn't just Heather being protective or territorial. This was a coordinated effort to separate me from my husband and replace me with someone the family deemed more appropriate. When Benjamin came home that evening, I was waiting with printouts of the most damning emails. His face fell as he saw them on the coffee table. "You went through my emails?" he asked, his voice a mix of anger and guilt. "Yes," I admitted without apology. "And you've been keeping secrets." Who is Allison? He sank onto the couch, looking suddenly exhausted. An ex-girlfriend from 6 years ago. My family loved her, old money, right connections, but we were wrong for each other. And you didn't think that history might be relevant given how your family has been treating me? I didn't want you to worry, he said weakly. I thought this time would be different because I'm actually in love with you. Different? I echoed. These emails show your sister has been trying to break us up since day one, and you've known about it. Did you know they seated you with Patricia's daughter when you went to the Children's Hospital benefit last month? His silence was confirmation enough. Did you know Heather has been calling me a gold digger to your entire family? I told her to stop, he said quietly. When she said it to me directly, I defended you. But you didn't tell me. You let me walk into family gatherings where people thought I was after your money, without giving me the chance to defend myself. Benjamin's partial confession continued, revealing a man far more aware of his family's manipulations than he had ever let on. He had been caught between loyalty to his family, particularly Heather, who had been his protector and guide since childhood, and his love for me. The family finances were more entangled than I had realized. Richard's company, where Benjamin worked, was kept afloat partly through investments from Heather's husband's family. Benjamin's salary, our comfortable lifestyle, was dependent on these complex financial relationships remaining intact. I felt trapped, he admitted. If I pushed too hard against Heather, it could affect everything. My job, my parents' security. So you sacrificed our marriage instead, I said, the hurt raw in my voice. I was trying to balance both, he insisted. I thought I could gradually change their minds about you, while they actively worked to replace me with Charlotte, while they excluded me from family events. That was your idea of balance. As we talked into the night, I felt increasingly like I was looking at a stranger. The man I had married, who I thought was strong and independent, was revealed as someone deeply enmeshed in unhealthy family dynamics, unable to break free even for the sake of his marriage. And yet I still loved him. Underneath the weakness and the deception was the Benjamin I had fallen for. Kind, thoughtful, capable of change. The question was whether he wanted that change enough to fight for it. As our conversation wound down around midnight, my phone pinged with an email notification. It was from Heather, sent to Benjamin with me copied. Unusual in itself. Benjamin, I know you're disappointed about the vacation arrangements, but I think this time apart will be good for both of you. You can use the perspective to think about what you really want long-term. Sometimes first marriages are learning experiences that prepare us for the right match later. Mom and Dad agree. We're here for you when you're ready to talk about next steps. The message was clear. They expected our marriage to end, were actively encouraging it, and the yacht trip was part of that plan. Benjamin read the email over my shoulder, his face pale. This has gone too far, he said, sounding genuinely shocked. I never thought she would be this explicit. But the damage was done. Heather had made the family's position crystal clear. And now I had a decision to make. Could this marriage be saved? Did I even want to try? I need some time to think, I told Benjamin. The yacht trip is in 2 days. You need to decide if you're going without me, knowing what that will signal to your family about our marriage. He looked torn, which told me everything I needed to know. Even now, with all the manipulation exposed, he couldn't bring himself to directly oppose his sister. I thought I might use the opportunity to confront them all together, he suggested. Make them see how wrong they've been about you. It was the final straw. While enjoying a luxury vacation on the yacht, they've excluded me from. No, Benjamin. If you go on that trip without me, don't expect me to be here when you get back. I walked to our bedroom and closed the door, leaving him alone with his decision. As I lay awake, I finalized my plan. It was time to take control of this situation once and for all. The morning after discovering the emails, Benjamin and I circled each other like wary strangers in our once happy home. He had slept on the couch, and his eyes were red-rimmed from a sleepless night. I had barely slept either, my mind racing with hurt, anger, and strategic planning. Can we talk? He asked as I made coffee. I nodded, steeling myself for whatever justifications he might offer now. I've been thinking all night, he began. About the emails about Heather about us. I think we need to consider a separation. The words hit me like a physical blow, despite everything that had happened. A separation, I repeated flatly. So your family wins. It's not about winning, he protested. It's about being realistic. You've seen the lengths Heather will go to. My family will never accept you, and I can't keep living torn between two worlds. You could choose to stand with your wife, I pointed out, my voice surprisingly steady. That's what marriage vows are about. It's not that simple, he said, running his hands through his hair. My job, my parents' financial situation. Everything is connected to family relationships that Heather manages. So your comfort is more important than your integrity, than our marriage. He had no answer for that. We sat in painful silence until he finally spoke again. I think I should go on the yacht trip. Use the time to figure things out, decide what I really want. If you get on that yacht without me, our marriage is over, I said simply. That's not an ultimatum, it's a fact. I won't be married to someone who consistently chooses his sister's approval over his wife's dignity. Benjamin left for work without resolving anything, and I called my office to request another personal day. My boss was understanding. I had accumulated weeks of unused vacation time over years of dedicated work. Take whatever time you need, Madison. He said. Your clients are in good hands with the team. Work had always been my refuge, the place where my competence was never questioned. Now, ironically, as my marriage crumbled, my career was facing a critical juncture as well. I had been offered a partnership at the firm, a culmination of years of effort and success. The final decision would be made during the same 2 weeks as the yacht trip. I had planned to handle some of the preparation remotely during the vacation. Now, I would have to manage everything while dealing with personal crisis. I spent the day organizing financial documents, making calls to my attorney, and updating my professional portfolio. If my marriage was ending, I needed to be prepared. The work was a welcome distraction from the hollow feeling in my chest. My friend Tara called to check on me after I texted her a brief update. I still can't believe he's even considering going on that trip, she said, outraged on my behalf. After finding those emails? That's beyond spineless. It is what it is, I replied, surprised by my own calm. I'm done fighting for someone who won't fight for me. What will you do if he goes? Move forward, I said simply. I have the partnership decision coming up. I have the yacht situation to handle. I'll focus on those things. But after ending the call, the brave face I'd maintained crumbled. I sank onto our bedroom floor back against the wall, and finally allowed myself to cry. I had loved Benjamin deeply. I had envisioned our future together, children growing old, building something meaningful. Now those dreams were dissolving, replaced by logistics and legal considerations. The loneliness was overwhelming. I couldn't fully confide in friends about my ownership of the yacht or my plans. It would sound either unbelievable or like I was seeking revenge. My parents lived across the country and had health issues of their own to manage. This was a battle I would have to fight largely alone. Benjamin came home late that night, and we engaged in another circular conversation that resolved nothing. He was still considering going on the trip, still caught between loyalties. I was still unwilling to accept being secondary in my own marriage. I love you, he insisted. That's never been a question. Love without courage isn't enough, I replied. I need a partner who stands beside me, not behind his sister. We slept in separate rooms again. The next day, the day before the yacht departure, I threw myself into work from my home office, attending virtual meetings and finalizing documents for the partnership consideration. Around noon, I received a text from Benjamin. I need more time to think. Going to stay at Kyle's tonight. Will let you know my decision about tomorrow. He didn't come home to pack, didn't call to explain further. Just a text message and absence. The message was clear. He was distancing himself, probably preparing to go on the trip. I sat in our silent apartment, feeling the weight of imminent loss. That night was my lowest point. I ordered takeout that I couldn't eat, opened a bottle of wine I didn't finish, and wandered through rooms filled with memories that now felt like artifacts from someone else's life. Around midnight, I found myself sitting on our bedroom floor again, Looking through photos on my phone, Benjamin and me in happier times, traveling, laughing, building what I thought was an unshakable bond. But as the night deepened, something shifted within me. The grief began to transform into resolve. I thought about all I had accomplished in my life, working my way through college, building a successful career, creating financial independence. I had done all of that on my own through determination and self-belief. I didn't need Benjamin's family to validate me. I didn't need Benjamin to protect me. What I needed was self-respect and the courage to demand the respect I deserved from others. Around 2 a.m. I made my final decision. I would follow through with my plan to confront the situation directly, not out of revenge, not to humiliate anyone, but to establish boundaries and consequences that had been missing from my relationship with the Ellis family. I sent a brief email to the yacht management company, confirming my arrival time the next day and requesting discretion from the crew until my signal. Then I chose my outfit carefully. A white linen dress, gold accessories, Jackie O sunglasses. The look of someone confident, composed, and very much in control. As dawn broke, I felt a strange calm. Whatever happened next, I would face it on my terms. If my marriage ended, it would end with my dignity intact. If by some miracle Benjamin chose to stand with me, our relationship would have a new foundation built on honesty and mutual respect. I was done being a victim of Heather's machinations and Benjamin's weakness. It was time to rewrite this story with myself as the author, not just a character others controlled. The morning of the yacht departure dawned bright and clear, as if the universe approved of my plans. I dressed with care in my chosen outfit, applied makeup with precision, and packed a small overnight bag, preparing for any outcome. Before leaving the apartment, I took one last look around the space that had been the center of my married life with Benjamin. Whatever happened today would determine whether I returned here as part of a couple or to pack my belongings. I drove myself to the marina, arriving 2 hours before the family was scheduled to board. The yacht gleamed in the morning sun, 120 feet of floating luxury that had been mine for nearly a year without anyone in Benjamin's family knowing. I had arranged to meet the captain, Derek, at a nearby cafe first to ensure we were aligned on how the day would unfold. Mrs. Ellis, Derek greeted me warmly as I joined him at an outdoor table overlooking the water. Good to finally meet you in person. Though I had purchased the yacht months ago, I had conducted all business through my financial team, never visiting the vessel myself. Derek had been retained from the previous ownership, a professional with decades of experience who managed the crew and charter arrangements. Thank you for your discretion, I said, settling across from him. I know this is an unusual situation. In my years at sea, I've learned family dynamics can be more dangerous than storms, he replied with a knowing smile. Your instructions were clear. The crew has been briefed to welcome the Ellis family as usual, with no mention of ownership until you arrive and give the signal. We discussed the logistics, where I would wait, when I would board, how the revelation would be handled. Derek was the consummate professional, focused on ensuring a smooth process despite the dramatic circumstances. The crew is loyal to the owner, Mrs. Ellis, he assured me. And that's you. As our meeting concluded, I felt a renewed confidence. One more thing, Derek. My husband may be with them, Benjamin Ellis. If he is, please treat him no differently than the others until I make my presence known. Derek nodded his understanding, and we parted ways. I positioned myself at another cafe with a clear view of the yacht, but where I wouldn't be easily spotted by arriving guests. From there, I watched as the crew made final preparations, moving efficiently around the deck. At precisely noon, the first of the Ellis family cars arrived. Richard and Eleanor emerged, followed by Heather and her husband Thomas. They were dressed in resort wear, sunglasses in place, looking every bit the affluent family embarking on their luxury vacation. The second car delivered Grace, her husband Mark, and cousins Kyle and Ryan. Still no sign of Benjamin. My heart raced as I watched them being greeted by Derek and his crew. Even from a distance, I could see Heather taking charge, undoubtedly giving instructions about luggage and cabin arrangements. Eleanor smiled politely at the crew while Richard engaged Derek in conversation, probably attempting to establish himself as the alpha male of the group. As they began to board, a third car pulled up. Benjamin stepped out, overnight bag in hand. My breath caught. He had decided to go through with the trip despite everything. I watched him pay the driver, his movements slow, his posture lacking the excitement the others had shown. He looked like a man walking to his own execution rather than starting a vacation. I waited until all family members had boarded and the crew began final preparations for departure. Then I gathered my courage, put on my sunglasses, and walked confidently toward the yacht. The security officer at the marina gate checked my ID and waved me through with a respectful nod. My name was on the permanent authorization list as owner. As I approached the gangway, a crew member I hadn't met spotted me. "Can I help you, ma'am?" he asked politely, clearly not recognizing me. "Madison Ellis," I said clearly. "I'm here to board." His eyes widened slightly in recognition of the name, but before he could respond, Derek appeared. "Mrs. Ellis," he called warmly, loud enough for those on deck to hear. "Welcome aboard. We're honored to have the owner joining us today." I smiled and thanked him, mounting the gangway with measured steps. As I reached the deck, I saw them, the entire Ellis family frozen in various poses of shock around the main deck lounge area. Heather stood near the bar, champagne flute halfway to her lips. Eleanor and Richard were seated on one of the white leather sofas. Benjamin stood slightly apart, his face draining of color as he saw me. "Madison." Heather recovered first. Her voice pitched higher than normal. "What are you doing here? There must be some mistake." Derek, playing his role perfectly, looked confused. "No mistake, Mrs. Heather. This is Mrs. Madison Ellis, the yacht's owner. We've been expecting her." The silence that followed was absolute. I removed my sunglasses slowly, making eye contact with each family member before speaking. "No mistake at all," I confirmed, my voice steady. "I've owned the Sapphire Seas for almost a year now. I've been looking forward to finally enjoying it personally instead of just reviewing the charter reports." Heather's face flushed deep red. "That's impossible. This yacht belongs to Meridian Charter Company. Meridian manages it," I corrected her. "But I own it. Would you like to see the documentation?" Derek discreetly handed me a leather portfolio containing the ownership papers, which I placed on the central table. Richard moved forward cautiously to examine them, his business experience allowing him to quickly confirm their authenticity. "These appear to be in order," he said, his voice strained. "Madison is indeed listed as the owner through her holding company." "This is ridiculous," Heather sputtered. "Why wouldn't you tell us? Why let us charter your yacht without saying anything? Why would you exclude your brother's wife from a family vacation?" I countered calmly. "Why orchestrate a campaign to undermine my marriage? We all have our little secrets, it seems." Benjamin finally found his voice. "Madison, I had no idea about the yacht, about any of this." "I know," I said, meeting his gaze. "That's not why I'm here." Heather attempted to regain control of the situation. "Well, this is certainly surprising, but it doesn't change our arrangements. We've chartered this vessel for 2 weeks. Actually," Derek interjected smoothly, "as the owner, Mrs. Ellis has priority rights at any time. Standard contract clause." The implication hung in the air. I could cancel their trip entirely if I chose. The family exchanged nervous glances, suddenly understanding their position. "That won't be necessary," I said, addressing Derek but ensuring everyone could hear. "I have no intention of disrupting plans. I'm simply exercising my right as owner to join this voyage." Relief visibly washed over several faces, quickly replaced by uncertainty. Eleanor spoke for the first time, her voice carefully modulated. "Of course you're welcome, Madison. Your family after all." The irony of this statement after years of subtle exclusion wasn't lost on anyone. I smiled politely but didn't acknowledge the hypocrisy directly. "Perhaps we should discuss cabin arrangements," Grace suggested awkwardly. "No need," I replied. "The owner's suite is always kept available, as per my contract with Meridian. Benjamin is welcome to join me there, of course, as my husband." All eyes turned to Benjamin, who looked torn between shock, embarrassment, and something that might have been admiration. "I think we have some things to discuss first," he said quietly. Heather made one last attempt to salvage her authority. This is highly irregular. We had specific plans for this trip, family traditions, which I'm looking forward to experiencing. I interrupted smoothly. As Benjamin's wife and a member of this family, despite previous oversights in including me, the power dynamic had shifted palpably. Family members who had previously followed Heather's lead now looked to me, uncertain of the new hierarchy. Heather herself seemed diminished, her carefully constructed control crumbling. "Well," Richard said, breaking the tense silence, "I believe this calls for a toast. To Madison, our hostess apparently." The irony in his voice was evident, but there was also a grudging respect. Glasses were raised with varying degrees of enthusiasm as the crew served champagne. Benjamin remained apart, his expression unreadable. As the initial shock wore off and the family dispersed to their cabins to settle in, Benjamin approached me at the railing where I stood watching the marina. "Why didn't you tell me?" he asked, his voice a mix of hurt and wonder. "Would it have changed anything?" I countered. "Would you have stood up to Heather sooner if you knew I owned the yacht she was excluding me from?" He had no answer for that. "This isn't about the yacht, Benjamin. It's about respect for me, for our marriage. It's about where your loyalty lies. I made the wrong choice," he admitted. "Coming here without you. I knew it the moment I got in the car. I was actually going to call and cancel, tell them I couldn't go through with it. And then you appeared like some avenging angel." "I'm no angel," I said. "Just a woman tired of being treated as less than I am." He reached for my hand hesitantly. "Where do we go from here?" I looked at him directly. "That depends on what happens during this trip. I'm not here for revenge, Benjamin. I'm here to establish boundaries that should have been in place from the beginning. How your family responds, how you respond, will determine whether our marriage has a future." As we stood there, I noticed Heather watching us from across the deck, her expression unreadable. The power had shifted, but the real test was just beginning. How would the Ellis family adapt to this new reality? And more importantly, would Benjamin finally stand firmly by my side? The yacht's engines rumbled to life, and we began to pull away from the marina. The journey, in more ways than one, had begun. The first day at sea unfolded in a surreal atmosphere of forced politeness and careful navigation, not just of the Mediterranean waters, but of dramatically altered family dynamics. Heather had retreated to her cabin immediately after the revelation, emerging hours later with a composed face but noticeably subdued demeanor. The other family members scattered around the yacht, finding activities that required minimal interaction as they processed the shock. Benjamin and I had a long, private conversation in the owner's suite, a stunning space with panoramic windows and elegant furnishings that even I was seeing for the first time. "I've been a coward," he admitted as we sat on the balcony overlooking the wake of the yacht. "I've known for years that Heather's control wasn't healthy, but it was easier to go along with it than to challenge the status quo." "Why?" I asked, genuinely curious. What made her approval so important? Benjamin sighed, looking out at the horizon. "When our father's business first started struggling, Heather was the one who stepped in. She married Thomas, secured investments through his family, essentially saved us from financial ruin. My parents treated her like a savior, and I felt I owed her my loyalty." "Loyalty shouldn't require sacrificing your marriage," I pointed out. "I know that now," he said, reaching for my hand. "Seeing you walk onto this yacht today, so confident, so completely in control, it was like seeing you clearly for the first time. I've underestimated you, and I've undervalued us. It was a start, but I needed more than words. What happens when we return to real life? When Heather has time to regroup and reassert control?" "That's over," he said firmly. "Whether you can forgive me or not, whether our marriage survives or not, I'm done letting Heather dictate my life. Today made me see how much I've compromised myself, not just you." That evening, the family gathered for dinner in the yacht's formal dining room. The crew had prepared an exquisite meal, and Derek had seated me at the head of the table, a position Heather had apparently occupied during previous trips. The symbolism wasn't lost on anyone. As wine was poured and appetizers served, Richard cleared his throat awkwardly. "I think we owe Madison an apology," he said, surprising everyone. "Our behavior regarding this trip was Less than welcoming. Eleanor nodded stiffly. We should have insisted you be included. Family is family. Their words were correct, but the sentiment felt rehearsed, a necessary concession rather than genuine remorse. Though, it was more acknowledgement than I had ever received before. Heather remained silent until all eyes eventually turned to her. I may have been overzealous in my role as family vacation coordinator, she finally said, her words carefully chosen. I apologize if you felt excluded. It was the classic non-apology. Sorry if you felt rather than sorry I did. But I accepted it with grace. This wasn't the time for confrontation, but for establishing a new foundation. Thank you, I replied simply. I look forward to experiencing the family traditions I've heard so much about. The next day, Benjamin and I had a private breakfast on our suite's terrace. As we enjoyed fresh fruit and coffee, he looked more relaxed than I had seen him in months. I spoke with Heather last night, he revealed. Really spoke with her honestly for the first time in years. How did that go? I asked, genuinely curious. It was difficult. She's built her identity around being the family savior, the one who holds everything together. Learning you own this yacht, something she coveted but couldn't afford. It shook her perception of herself and her role. I never meant to humiliate her, I said truthfully. This wasn't about showing off wealth. I know, he nodded. I explained that to her. I also made it clear that our marriage is my priority, and that the dynamic between her and you, between her and us, needs to change fundamentally. And her response? Mixed, he admitted. She's hurt, defensive, but also, I think she's realizing how her behavior has affected everyone. She mentioned that Thomas has been unhappy with her focus on controlling the family rather than on their marriage. Over the next few days, a gradual shift occurred in the family interactions. Grace, who had previously followed Heather's lead in excluding me, sought me out for a private conversation. I owe you an apology, she said as we lounged on the sundeck. A real one, not the diplomatic version from dinner. I went along with Heather's perspective without questioning it. And that was wrong. Her sincerity surprised me. Thank you for saying that. The truth is, she continued, I was a bit jealous. You're so accomplished, so independent. I followed the family path, married who they approved of, work where they suggested. You built something for yourself. These moments of genuine connection continued to emerge. Kyle asked about my investment strategies over lunch. Richard inquired about my thoughts on market trends. Even Eleanor softened, sharing family stories without the usual exclusionary references to our traditions. Benjamin, true to his word, stayed firmly by my side throughout, no longer deferring to Heather in conversations or decisions. When she attempted to change an itinerary stop without consulting everyone, he gently but firmly suggested we stick to the original plan unless everyone agreed to the change. It was a small moment, but significant in the history of their relationship. One evening about a week into the trip, Eleanor asked to speak with me privately. We walked along the upper deck as the sun set over the Mediterranean. I've not been fair to you, she said without preamble. When Benjamin married you, I was concerned about your background, your different upbringing. I worried you wouldn't understand our ways. Your ways being? I prompted. Family loyalty, tradition, appearances, she said with a small sigh. But I've been watching you this week. You've handled this situation with more grace than many born into privilege would have. You didn't cancel our trip, didn't humiliate us publicly, though you had every right to. That wouldn't have solved anything, I pointed out. No, it wouldn't have, she agreed. Madison, I hope you can forgive an old woman's prejudices. I would like a chance to be a proper mother-in-law to you. Her words seemed genuine, her expression open in a way I had never seen before. I reached out and squeezed her hand. I would like that too. The most challenging conversation came near the end of the trip, when Heather asked me to join her for tea in a quiet corner of the yacht. I've been thinking about what Benjamin said, she began, her hands wrapped tightly around her teacup, about how my need for control has affected everyone. I remained silent, letting her continue at her own pace. When Dad's business started failing, everything felt chaotic. Controlling the family gave me a sense of security, If I could manage where we vacationed, who we associated with, how we presented ourselves, then maybe everything would be okay. And then I came along, I said softly. An unknown variable you couldn't control. She nodded reluctantly. You were different. Independent. Benjamin changed around you. Became less responsive to family expectations. It felt threatening. I never wanted to take Benjamin away from his family, I assured her. I just wanted to be accepted as part of it. I understand that now, she said, meeting my eyes directly for perhaps the first time. I can't promise instant change, but I am willing to try a different approach moving forward. It wasn't a Hollywood moment of tearful reconciliation, but it was a beginning. A crack in the wall that had separated us since the day we met. As our yacht approached the final port of call, Benjamin and I stood at the bow, watching the coastline emerge from the morning mist. Are we going to be okay? He asked, his arm around my waist. I considered the question seriously. I think so. But things need to be different when we return home. Real change, not just vacation promises. They will be, he assured me. I've already talked to Dad about taking a more active role in the company, making decisions independently rather than just following the family line. And I've been thinking about that business idea I mentioned months ago, the one Heather dismissed. The Sustainable Investment Initiative? He nodded, looking energized. I think it's time to pursue it, with or without family approval. I smiled, feeling hopeful for the first time in months. I'd like to hear more about it. As we docked that afternoon, I observed the family disembarking, different somehow from the group that had boarded 2 weeks ago. Richard walking with Benjamin, genuinely listening to his ideas. Eleanor and Grace planning a lunch together without checking with Heather first. And Heather herself, less rigid in her movements, holding Thomas's hand in a way I hadn't seen before. The transformation wasn't complete or perfect, but it was real. The vacation that was meant to separate Benjamin and me had instead created an opportunity for genuine connection and growth. Not just in our marriage, but within the entire family dynamic. 1 year later, Benjamin and I hosted the annual Ellis family Thanksgiving at our new home. A beautiful brownstone we had purchased together, combining our resources and tastes in a way that symbolized our stronger partnership. The past 12 months had brought significant changes for everyone. Benjamin had indeed launched his sustainable investment division at his father's company, which was showing promising early returns. He had grown more confident in his business decisions, no longer seeking Heather's approval for every move. Our marriage had strengthened through honest communication and the clear boundaries we had established with his family. The doorbell rang, and I welcomed Richard and Eleanor, who arrived bearing wine and flowers. The place looks beautiful, Madison, Eleanor said warmly, embracing me. Our relationship had evolved into something I wouldn't have thought possible before the yacht revelation. We met monthly for lunch, and she had even asked my advice about modernizing some of the family's philanthropic efforts. Richard seemed more relaxed than I had ever seen him. The company was doing better under the new structure, with Benjamin taking more leadership and bringing fresh ideas. Something smells delicious, he commented, heading toward the kitchen. Kyle and his new girlfriend arrived next, followed by Grace and Mark with their children. The atmosphere was light, conversations flowing easily without the strict protocol that had previously governed family gatherings. Heather and Thomas were the last to arrive, though our relationship remained the most complex. We had reached a respectful understanding. She no longer attempted to exclude me from family events. In fact, she had consulted me about the Christmas gathering she was planning. Madison. She greeted me with a genuine smile. Thank you for hosting. These are for you. She handed me a beautifully wrapped package. Inside was a framed photo of Benjamin and me on the yacht, caught in a moment of laughter by one of the crew. A reminder of new beginnings, the card read. As dinner progressed, I observed the transformed family dynamic. Benjamin spoke about his projects with passion, no longer downplaying his ideas to avoid overshadowing others. Grace shared news about her return to graduate school, a dream she had abandoned years ago under family pressure. Even Richard contributed stories about his early business mistakes, puncturing the mythology of infallibility that had surrounded him. After dessert, as the family moved to the living room for coffee, Eleanor asked for a private word. We stepped into the study, where she seemed uncharacteristically nervous. "There's something you should know," she began. "Something about Heather that might help you understand her behavior more fully." She revealed that Heather had been facing significant financial difficulties for the past 2 years. Thomas's family business had suffered major losses, and they had been maintaining appearances while struggling privately. The yacht trips, the lavish parties, the designer clothes, all had been increasingly financed by debt as they tried to maintain the facade of success. She was terrified of anyone discovering the truth, Eleanor explained. "Especially you with your financial expertise. She feared you would see through the illusion they'd created." "Why are you telling me this now?" I asked. "Because they finally agreed to get help. Thomas is restructuring the business, and they're selling their vacation home. Heather is learning to live with a new reality, but it's been devastating to her self-image." This revelation illuminated so much of Heather's behavior. Her desperate need for control, her hostility toward me, her emphasis on maintaining appearances. The woman who had tried to exclude me from a yacht trip couldn't afford her own lifestyle. The irony was almost painful. That evening, after everyone had left, I shared Eleanor's revelation with Benjamin. "What do you want to do with this information?" he asked. It was a moment of choice. I could take satisfaction in Heather's comeuppance, or I could choose a different path. "I think we should help them," I said after consideration. "Not with handouts, but with expertise. Your sustainable business model might work for Thomas's company, and I could advise them on restructuring their finances." Benjamin looked at me with a mixture of surprise and admiration. "After everything she put you through, this isn't about forgiveness or forgetting," I explained. "It's about building something better moving forward." Heather's behavior came from insecurity and fear. If we address those root causes, maybe we can have a healthier family dynamic for everyone. The next day, I invited Heather for coffee, just the two of us without Benjamin or Thomas as buffers. When she arrived, tense but trying to appear casual, I approached the subject gently. "Eleanor told me about the financial situation," I said directly but kindly. "I want you to know that I understand maintaining appearances when things are difficult." Her face flushed with embarrassment, but then something surprising happened. Her shoulders relaxed, as if releasing a burden. "It's been exhausting," she admitted. "Pretending everything's perfect when it's falling apart." "You don't have to pretend with family," I told her. "Real family supports each other through difficulties." We talked for over 2 hours that day, moving beyond surface politeness to genuine conversation. I shared some preliminary ideas for restructuring their finances, and she actually listened without defensiveness. By the time she left, something fundamental had shifted between us. Over the next few months, Benjamin and I worked with Thomas and Heather to develop a realistic plan for their business and personal finances. It wasn't always smooth. Old habits of competition and control emerged occasionally, but the foundation was stronger. 6 months after our Thanksgiving gathering, the entire family gathered once again for a special occasion. A vow renewal ceremony for Benjamin and me on our yacht. Yes, still our yacht, though now everyone knew it. As we stood on the deck where the confrontation had taken place a year and a half earlier, Benjamin took my hands in his. "When I think about how close I came to losing you because of my inability to stand up for what matters," he said, his voice carrying across the assembled family, "I'm reminded that love requires courage. Madison, you taught me that courage. You showed me what it means to love with integrity, to build a partnership based on truth and mutual respect." I looked around at the gathered faces, Eleanor wiping a tear, Richard standing tall and proud, Kyle and Grace smiling genuinely, and Heather, standing beside Thomas, meeting my gaze with a nod of respect that would have been unimaginable before. "Family isn't about control or appearances," I said in my response. "It's about accepting each other's authentic selves, supporting each other through challenges, and growing together through conflicts rather than avoiding them." "Benjamin, you've shown me that people can change when given the chance, that relationships can heal with honesty and effort." As the captain, still Derek, who had witnessed the original confrontation, pronounced us still married, Benjamin and I kissed to the applause of a very different family than the one that had tried to exclude me from their yacht trip. Later, as the celebration continued, I found myself standing at the railing with Heather, watching the sunset in companionable silence. "I never thought we'd be here," she admitted. "That day when you walked onto the yacht and revealed you were the owner, I was certain it was the end of my relationship with Benjamin, maybe with the whole family. And I never imagined we'd be working together, actually getting along," I replied honestly. "Life is full of surprises," she said, then added with a small smile, "some better than others." As the yacht cruised along the coast, I reflected on the journey. Not just the physical voyage, but the emotional one that had transformed a fractured family. Standing up for myself had saved more than my dignity. It had created the opportunity for authentic relationships based on truth rather than appearances. The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in brilliant orange and pink. Benjamin joined us at the railing, placing an arm around each of us in a gesture that would have been impossible before. "To family," he said simply. "The real kind." We raised our glasses in agreement. 3 people who had moved beyond power struggles to something more genuine and lasting. The yacht sailed onward, carrying not just passengers but a family redefined by honesty, respect, and the courage to change. What would you do if someone tried to exclude you from your own property? Would you have handled it differently than I did? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this story of family dynamics and standing up for yourself, please hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life relationship stories. Thank you for joining me on this journey. And remember, sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply claim your rightful place at the table.